Warning, 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 warning.
How's it hanging, dudes? My name is Sean. Welcome back to Brutal Games and another honest movie review. This is an attempt to make a case for Alita Battle Angel. Cyberpunk is on everyone's radar. It's permanently back in the mainstream. Hell, I'm even making a documentary on the genre itself, so naturally films are a part of that, right? Which brings us to Alita Battle Angel. Critics are hating this film. Why, you ask? Maybe due to ignorance of the franchise.
What do you guys think?
The CGI was spectacular.
Wow.
The acting was good. But once you got to the story...
In writing, and the lines.
And dialogue. And the most... Okay, guys.
So many people actually like the film, giving it upwards of 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. So what we have is people who don't know how to make movies complaining about dialogue and story, while fans of the franchise are loving it. So what is happening? So with real unbiased, fresh eyes, I went to watch the movie. I walked into the theater having never read the manga and didn't even watch the trailer. The only thing I knew about the movie was that people supposedly hated it, and it was the cyberpunk genre. That's the two things. And the cyberpunk genre, which is usually enough to get me off my ass in an IMAX with those stupid one-size-fits-all 3D glasses on my face. So, there I was. And if you think that I, did a decent job of making a good case for this film, then by the end of the review, I would appreciate if you considered leaving a like and subscribing. If you didn't like the movie at all, please let me know why. I really do want to know why, because I actually enjoyed it. So, there is a bit to unpack here. I had to wade through the muck, and this is what I uncovered. So, a simple elevator pitch to someone who has never seen the film or read the manga would be that it is the story of a Mary Sue, set to a backdrop of a somewhat typical cyberpunk dystopian world, and her search to find out who she is. Alright, I can already sense the eye rolling. You can stop typing in the comments. Look, I know we have dealt with botched Mary Sues before, but the story element of a Mary Sue doesn't inherently mean it's bad. There are plenty of Mary Sue stories that are superb, more than there are bad ones, and this is a good one. Not great, but good. Better than most make it out to be. So, in a world full of cybernetically enhanced hunter warriors tasked with defending the populace that is left behind, there is bound to be someone who is just simply undefeatable. And this is where Alita comes in. Pulled from the rubbish dump and given a cybernetic body and a second chance at life. From here we learn that she is practically invincible, and we learn this along with her. In fact, we learn everything with her. Everything is new in this world to both us and Alita. She says many cheesy and curious things, as would you if you were suddenly memory wiped and planted in an advanced futuristic place you have seemingly never been before. I found that this was a common theme within the manga as well. And this is where it allows for her downfalls to come in, her weaknesses. Yeah, she is a Mary Sue, but not knowing who she is and having to hack through so many memorable cybernetic enemies, she soon turned into a superhero in a quest to find out what she is. That was the Mary Sue aspect of her. But when you have a Mary Sue, they have to be still fighting for something. There has to be something there. There has to be an overarching plot for that person to overcome. If you don't have physical elements, or you're not as strong, and you're not overcoming that, you're already the baddest of all the asses, right? You still have to have something motivating you. This movie does that perfectly. Her Mary Sue nature is completely explained. I mean, she is a different alien race from the humans, and she has daily contact with these humans, right? So obviously there's going to be a conflict of interest. She's going to be very curious. Things aren't going to make sense to her. The fact that she fumbles dialogue is by design. You wouldn't be perfect if you had your memory wiped and then turned back on one day later. You just wouldn't. This plotline was fully fleshed out, even if a tiny bit rushed. And I, for one, enjoyed it. It was a cybernetic plotline that was done in sort of like Total Recall was, and it went well. And I think that the fact that I realized this cyberpunk thing long before I even went into the movie theater helped me understand the situation. This is not to say there aren't bad things about the movie. There is a short list, but that doesn't break the movie, and some of these actually enhance it. So, for example, They incorporated too much of the manga too early in a film sequel, resulting in rushed plot lines and character arcs for Alita and Hugo. Worst part of the film, and was similar to the botched series of Unfortunate Events by Jim Carrey, where they took too many of the books and forced them into one movie, right? It just makes everything rushed, forces everything along, and you're not really stuck with the sense of feeling of accomplishment whenever they learn something new or advance in the story, right? As you would be in a book, and that's typically what happens whenever you're adapting a book, novel, manga into a movie, right? The romance between the two was rushed and poorly executed. This is a bad one too. You know, that was just another plot line that they just shoved in there just to make it work because it was in the manga. Now that's kind of a good thing because at least they're giving us the stuff that was in the manga that many hardcore fans was actually dying for, which is also the reason why there's so much praise on Rotten Tomatoes for the audience, because a lot of the people actually recognize a lot of this stuff and they say, oh wow, they're actually trying to implement all this stuff. The thing is, they implemented way too much in one movie instead of spacing it out. The romance was one of the main things. And the romance itself really serves to thicken Alita's plot, and it kind of fell short a little bit in this movie. Small lore-based plot holes like what exactly happened on Mars and after, as well as on Earth, right? There's a few small plot holes, but it's really not a huge deal. And finally, there's political correctness, and that's really a non-issue, and we'll get into those. So number 1 and 2, I can make no excuse for. Cameron and the others who made this film have to have read, and or at least had people and writers who have read the full manga, right? Or at least liaisons to look at the editing and be like, hey, you should add this or take away that. So you would then know that Alita's coming to power or general curiosity took a while to unfold and develop. They could have fixed this by having a coming of age montage, because Alita is very much a child in the sense of learning things for the first time. Or they could have made the movie out to be the first couple manga in the series, and the ending could have resulted in the big fight with Zapan and the other cyborgs that were really cool but had little character development, but were just shoved in for fan service. They just cramped way too much into one movie, between Alita finding out who she is, becoming a hunter warrior, having a romance, having other rivals, along with the parent battle she has with the Doc, to Motorball, to Hugo ripping apart the hard bodies, plus all the backstory and the world building that was needed, and plus all the character arcs, wrapping them all up, because the movie does that. It wraps all these character arcs up in story plots back to one, and finally to the showdown with Nova, right? But there's just so much there to be done in just a couple hours that you really didn't have time to immerse yourself into what was actually happening behind the scenes. And there's a lot there, but you don't really have time to catch it all without subsequent viewings, because there is just so much there, which still is a good thing, because for movies that are being adapted from manga and other films, a lot of times they do bad with audiences because there's just so much left out from those works, right? This one kind of suffers from the problem by adding too much almost in such a short time span. So these I make no excuse for. It should have been a longer movie, or made into two. But let's look at the other two so-called flaws. As far as some of the plot holes go, the mystery of Mars is a good thing to be left out, and so are much of the others. It provides mystery and intrigue, and brings people back to the theaters for a second installment or subsequent viewings, and increases the hardcore fan base, as many people rush out to get the manga so they can decipher everything that has been cameoed in the film from the series, and there is actually a lot. So it's literally a good thing for the film, and adds a little touch or nod to the hardcore fans who will notice these things. And I literally just thumb through some pages on the web of the manga just so I can brush myself up about it, right? And there's a lot of the stuff that coincides with the film. But a lot of people who reviewed this movie just went into it as if it was a brand new movie coming out and had no prior future at all, right? And that's just, it's asinine. It really is. So it's literally a good thing for the film, and adds a little touch or nod to the hardcore fans who will notice these things. As for political correctness or SJW stuff goes, I just wish people would realize that it's a non-issue. When it comes to movies and stories of the cyberpunk genre, it's not a case of they made a female the lead and she's super powerful like the SJW cook of Star Wars. Actually, no. In a cyberpunk world, everyone is past that. When you can literally chop off your head and put it onto another body and in an afternoon later be racing down the street, I'm pretty sure it's common for people to just switch genitalia multiple times in life. It's so normal. There are, modern politics is completely circumvented and isn't even applicable here. And the fact that the evil white man controls the black guy is a non-issue because it could easily be switched around. It's not a prejudice of race or gender. It's purely a prejudice of, do you have the tech or do you not? If you don't, you're a nobody. And if you do, then you're a target. That is the inequality of a cyberpunk genre film. So, because everything is just so much more advanced and complicated, even if there is slight little similarities. You're literally just putting yourself in the film when you don't need to be. And then that's when I realized that I was actually liking this movie. It was because I went into this film knowing it was a cyberpunk. And it dawned on me, people who are hating this movie don't understand the concepts of a cyberpunk reality. And that's why a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense to them, or why they're confused on why a lot of the things aren't fully explained. Well, it's because if you spend 5 minutes in a cyberpunk, genre, book, movie, film, anything, a lot of these things are self-explanatory. And if you're one of those people who don't understand, you won't know what things I'm talking about. But if you are a cyberpunk person, you'll know exactly the types of things I'm talking about. So it is what it is. If you want to know the things I'm talking about, do your research. Don't go into movies blind. It's just the way it is. It allowed me to understand what Alita was and why she was curious. It helped me realize that a lot of these cheesy lines weren't just written by the film team, but it was taken as fan service from the manga and implemented. Because I was watching it through a cyberpunk lens, it allowed me to understand the superhero quality of the movie while appreciating the dark undertones. The cybernetics wasn't just for the on-screen 3D effect, it was because that is the reality of the universe. That is the story. So in the end, it's just ignorance, the lack of knowing. That is what is preventing normies from liking it. Instead of going to a horror film and being surprised by how scary it is, you should know a bit about the genre of horror and read up a bit on it on the franchise, so you're not left looking stupid when you say something like this about a film.
It was so melodramatic. It was so exposition heavy. Does James Cameron have no fucking idea how to write a script?
Albeit they crammed too much into this one film as the intro to the franchise, but they at least finished the character arcs, shown how a Mary Sue could be done right, and introduced the public to the delectably dark themes of cyberpunk genre, making us all think if any of this future could be possible. So to close, I recommend this movie if you like futuristic dystopian cyberpunk style, right? I'll give this movie a solid 6.5 out of 10. There is a lot they can build on and plenty of future sequel plot points set up. It could have been an 8 if it wasn't so crammed full of what was presented as natural progression in the manga. I'll give hate when it needs it, but this movie needs constructive criticisms, not ignorant blind rage for clicks. Maybe the reason why such huge channels are kind of failing, maybe. Nevertheless, I'm looking forward to more. And that's all I got for now, guys. Part 2 of the timeline of Cyberpunk is in progress, so stay tuned. And if you routinely have a staring contest with the sun and win, then make sure you smack a like and subscribe. And until next time, piss off.
2 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe, and I get more ass than a toilet seat. 3 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I met a bad bitch last night in the D. Let me tell you how I made her leave with me. Conversation and Hennessy. I've been to the motherfucking mountaintop.